Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we have another lecture on Mauryan Empire, and the precise discussion would be around Mauryan administration, Mauryan polity, and of course Dhamma policy. And so far we have already discussed the various sources to study to construct the story of Mauryan Empire and society and economy. So in today's lecture we will try to see how the administration function, how they were organized, and what were the important state policy that were being initiated and were taken up to control this whole state of affairs of the time. So, and for discussion on this very topic, we have in the studio Dr. O.P. Singh. He teaches history in the Delhi College of Arts and Commerce and in University of Delhi, and his area of specialization is ancient India. So I think his knowledge and experience will help us to understand this topic, to understand this administration and polity of the Mauryan Empire. So on your behalf, I welcome him for the EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amrinderji, and good afternoon, viewers. Today, as Amrinderji said, we have to discuss the Mauryan administration, nature of polity or nature of the state, and policy of Dhamma adopted by Asoka. So, to begin with, let us first talk about the Mauryan administration. Now, needless to say, it was a monarchical system of government, and in such a system, the king was head of the state and in charge of all the affairs taking place within his state. Now, if we look at conventional historiography, the historians of older generation and some historians of modern times too have suggested that Mauryan state was a highly centralized state. Now, this is a matter of debate that we shall discuss when we talk about the nature of the polity. But this much one can say that it was a very strong and powerful state, and it had very firm grip over a very vast area that was under their control. Now, if we look at contemporary sources, Arthashastra says that whenever there is a conflict between the Shastra Nyaya and Dharma Nyaya, Shastra Nyaya is the law of Shastras and Dharma Nyaya is the law of the king. So, whenever there is a conflict between two, in such a situation, the Dharma Nyaya should prevail. So, it gives immense power, the kind of polity that we have for Mauryas, or the system that we have, administrative system that we have for Mauryas. It seems to suggest that the authority of the king was unlimited. It was complete control in the hands of the king. And as we said, it was a monarchical form of government, but this monarchical form of government was with some touch of paternal despotism, because in the Holy Edict, Asoka says that all men are my children. Now, he tries to project himself as the father of the entire population in his country, and he expects them to treat him like his father, and he also likes to treat his citizen as his children. Now, one can understand that how a father treats his children and how the children should behave with his father, and what should be the reciprocal arrangement between the two. Similar kind of arrangement was probably sought by Asoka when he says that all men are my children. Now, as far as administration is concerned, let us start with the central administration first. King was all powerful. He was in charge of all executive, legislative, judicial and military activities within his country. But to assist the king, there was a council of ministers which was known as Mantri Parishad, as said in the Arthashastra. Now, the number of the ministers is not fixed. If we look at Arthashastra, the number of ministers is not fixed. It seems to be varying, but probably it consisted of 3 to 4 members apart from the Mukhya Mantri or the chief minister, who was the who also may be called the Prime Minister. So it was a small group, a small cabinet, a small council of ministers which was there to assist the king. Now it is important to note here that this Mantri Parishad was there only to assist the king, but the king was not bound to accept the advices of the minister. Nevertheless, because the king appointed his own trusted men to the various posts, and probably they were experts in their field, that is why they were appointed. So king usually accepted the advices of the ministers, and the main function of the ministers was to look after the functioning of their respective department, and the concerned officials were expected to report to them, and they dealt with the concerned officials, and officials dealt with the concerned ministers. Then another important aspect of central administration is revenue administration. Now we have a reference of two very important officials for the purpose of revenue administration. One is Samaharta. Samaharta was basically the revenue collector. His responsibility was collection of revenues from cities, other areas, mines, forests, roads, fines, tolls, licenses, etc., etc. And when this revenue was collected, it was deposited with another official called Sannidhatta, who was treasurer of the state, and he was responsible for collection of, the revenue was deposited with him, whether it was in cash or in kind. Now as far as the financial year of the Mauryas is concerned, it began in Asar, that can correspond with July month of English calendar, and there were 354 working days in this calendar. Now apart from it, the central administration also consisted of the 27 Adhyakshas. We talked about them when we were talking Mauryan economy, and these Adhyakshas were responsible for the functioning of their own departments, such as Sita Adhyaksha, Loha Adhyaksha, Akara Adhyaksha, Khanya Adhyaksha, etc., etc. So all these were basically part of central administration. Then apart from central administration, we have quite relevant information that is related to provincial administration as well. The entire Mauryan kingdom was divided into 4 provinces. The northern province with its capital at Takshashila, the southern province with its capital at Suvarnagiri, the eastern province with its capital at Tosali, and the western province was, the capital of the western province was at Ujjaini. Now all these provinces were given under the control of a prince from the royal family who was known as Kumar or Aryaputra. So just as there was the king in the central administration, in provincial administration the chief of provincial administration was the Kumar or Aryaputra, who was a member of the royal family. Now again, similarly to assist the provincial administrator or governor, here in this case Kumar or Aryaputra, there was a council of ministers. Now this council of ministers was exact replica of the central council of ministers, but it was more powerful than the central council of ministers, because here in this case probably the Kumar or Aryaputra was bound to accept the advices of the ministers. Now this can be probably because the people who were appointed as Kumar or Aryaputra, the members of royal family were appointed as Kumar or Aryaputra or as governor of the provinces, it was sort of intensive for them, it was sort of training for them, and because they were novices, because they were inexperienced rather, so the experienced ministers advised the chiefs of the provincial administration, and that is why the chief had to accept the advices rendered by the council of ministers in the provinces. Then in the provincial administration, we find a very important cadre of officials that is known as Mahamatya. Mahamatya basically was a cadre of officials that was highly responsible cadre of officials, and it can be equated with the 7th class of Megasthenes. If we look at the class categories of Megasthenes, in 7th class he mentions magistrates. So probably the Mahamatyas of Mauryan administration can be equated with the magistrates of Megasthenes. Now, as far as Arthashastra is concerned, if we go by Arthashastra, Arthashastra uses this term only to mean a minister. But in fact, if we look at contemporary inscriptions, these people have been assigned a number of duties, a number of functions have been assigned to them. So, they were not a particular official or minister, but they were in fact a cadre of officials from which various important officials were appointed. It can be compared with the modern cadre of IAS, who from which cadre a number of important officials are appointed to various departments to look after the administration. Then after provincial administration, we have district administration. Now, the in charge of district administration was a person called Pradeshik. Now, his responsibility was to look after the collection of revenue, maintenance of law and order, and they were also responsible to look after the works of various adhyakshas, those departments which were located in some particular districts. So, of course, they were looked after by the adhyakshas, but the pradeshikas looked after the work of adhyakshas as well. Now, they were also given certain judicial responsibilities too, because 3 pradeshikas or 3 mantris made a very important judicial bench where cases of very serious nature were tried. Now, here one can also mention about the judicial administration of Mauryas as well, because here we find during Mauryan times for the first time the separation of 2 courts, the civil court and the criminal court. The civil court was known as Dharmastheya, whereas the criminal court was known as Kantak Sodhan. Now, this information comes from the Arthashastra. Now, coming back to the pradeshikas, responsibility of the pradeshikas, since they were responsible for maintenance of law and order and collection of revenue, so they were in fact in charge of the overall administration of their district, and in this capacity they made an inspection tour of their respective districts almost every 5 years. They were rather supposed to inspect their district, tour their districts rather every 5 years. Then apart from Pradeshik, another important official of Mauryan time in district administration was a person called, an official rather called Rajuka. Rajuka was basically subordinate to Pradeshika, but his work was restricted to rural areas only. So, whereas Pradeshika was responsible for the administration, overall administration of his district, Rajuka was only responsible for the rural administration in his district. Now, as I said, Rajukas were subordinate to them, subordinate to the Pradeshikas. So, they were sort of junior officials at district level as compared to the Pradeshikas. Now, as far as their responsibilities are concerned, they were, apart from performing other duties, they were expected to teach the policy of Dhamma, the policy that was adopted by Asoka. Then they also get, at a later stage, they also get some judicial power as well. It's probably in 27th regnal year of Asoka, they get some judicial power as well. And the sources are to be believed, it can be suggested that appeals could be made to them in case of death sentence as well. So, they were also responsible for looking after serious cases. Now, apart from it, they were also responsible for surveying and assessment of land, to survey the land and fix the land revenue according to the nature and quality of the land. Now, if we look at other sources, for example, Megasthenes Indica, Megasthenes mentions of a particular official called agronomoi, and if we look at Jataka stories, there is reference of an official called Raju Gahak. Now, scholars have suggested that probably it was the Rajuka who is the Raju Gahak of Jataka stories and agronomoi of Megasthenes, and thus if he was the agronomoi as mentioned by Megasthenes, so this official was also responsible for supervision of irrigation as well as construction of the road. Then the lowest category at district level of officials consisted of the yuktas. Now, yuktas were basically subordinate officials who were given the responsibility of secretarial and accounting work. So, they were expected to maintain the record of the administration of district level, and they were not given any important authority. They were just expected to keep and maintain the records. Now, below district administration, there was the administration of sub-divisional level. A subdivision in fact actually consisted of a unit of 5 to 10 villages, and at this level we have mention of two officials who are known as Gopa and Sthanik. Now, Gopa was basically an accountant, and the responsibilities of the Gopa consisted of setting up of village boundaries. If there were village disputes or boundary disputes, it was within the purview of Gopa, and he used to settle such boundary disputes. Then registration of land, buildings, gifts and remission of taxes were also carried out by Gopa only, because these were very important functions at local level, and all these functions were taken care of by Gopa. Apart from it, he kept a census of the village population, and at the same time he also maintained a record of the livestock in each village, or all the villages falling within his jurisdiction. And he was also expected to keep the record of income and expenditure of each and every person within his jurisdiction. So, at this level, at subdivisional level, Gopa seems to be a very important official who was vested with a number of authorities and who looked after these responsibilities with the help of another official at subdivisional level called Sthanik, because the assessment was done by the Rajuka, the record was maintained by the Gopa, but the tax was actually collected by the Sthanik. Now, as far as the status or position of a Sthanik is concerned, he did not work under the Gopa. In fact, he worked directly under the Pradeshik, or the in charge of the district administration. So, we can see that Pradeshik had very important function to perform within his jurisdiction, and in fact, he was directly responsible for conduct of administration, all sort of administration falling within his own district. Then the lowest unit of administration since time immemorial in our country has been the village, and here too during Mauryan times too, villages were the lowest unit of administration. Now, as far as administration at village level is concerned, it was conducted by headmen who were chosen by the elders of the village, all the elders of a particular village choose a headman from amongst them, and he was responsible for conduct of administration of a village. Now, he was an unpaid, he was not an official and he was not paid any salary for it, but he was responsible, he was a responsible person because he was expected to supervise land and revenue collection. In fact, he used to assist the Sthanik in the collection of revenue. He also looked after the matters of discipline and defense within his own village, and he was responsible to the Gopa. But it's very important to see that he was not a part of the bureaucracy of Mauryan administration, he was not paid for it. Now, apart from all these aspects of administration, which are mostly related to rural areas, we have some different sets of rules for administration of cities. If we believe Arthashastra, Arthashastra seems to suggest that the administration of the city was under the control of a person who was known as Nagarak, and then it is suggested that in each city there were again two officials, Gopa and Sthanik, who were there to assist the Nagarak. So, the administration of urban areas, according to Arthashastra, administration of urban areas was also looked after by the Gopa and Sthanika, who were appointed for the administration of a particular city. They were under the control of the Nagarak. Now, the procedure of appointment of this the Nagarak is not known, whether he was a part of bureaucracy or not, it was also not known. But Gopa and Sthanik work under Nagarak, and they were given the same responsibilities as in the case of rural administration. So, in city administration too, Gopa was expected to keep the records, register the gifts, and maintain the census of a particular city, maintain the record of income and expenditure and livestock and capital and wealth of the city. And the Sthanik was responsible for collection of the taxes from a particular city. But for city administration, Megasthenes has provided a different sort of structure. Now, according to Megasthenes, the city administration was under 6 committees. There were various committees that were formed for administration of city, and those committees looked after various departments. So, Megasthenes suggests that there were 6 committees, and each committee consisted of 5 members. 5 members each. So, there were 5 members in each committee, and the number of committees was 6. Now, Megasthenes again goes on to enumerate the committees which are related to industrial art, probably related to production and all. Then there was a committee to look after foreigners registered, because every foreign citizen was registered, and so this committee probably looked after the foreigners coming within a particular city. Then there was a committee that registered birth and death. Then there was a committee to look after weights and measures, because trade and commercial activities mostly took place in urban areas. That is why there was a committee to look after the weights and measure activities. And the 5th committee was related to sales, and 6th committee was related to collection of taxes from a particular city. Now, apart from all these officials, we have some other officials also which were part of Mauryan administration, but cannot fit within a particular category of central or provincial or local administration, subdivisional administration, and these officials can be enumerated as one was Durgapal or Dawarik, as the name suggests. He was, rather they were the gatekeepers of the palace, because there are various palaces in different cities, and the people responsible to look after the defense of those palaces were called Durgapal or Dawarik. Then there was another category of official which is known as Policini. Policini were in fact agents of the king with a rank of Yukta. Now, Yukta rank official which we find in district administration were also appointed as police. Probably they were spies, because according to Asokan inscriptions, according to Asokan edicts, it seems that these policenis who were spies were selected from a variety of group of people. Some were appointed from amongst the orphans, some others were appointed from amongst brahmanas, some were widows, some were ordinary women, and some of them were recruited from the Sudras. So, because these were spies, they were selected from such group of people who keep on wandering, and generally people do not suspect them, and these people in fact spied for the state and reported the matters to the king or the administration. Then we have another category of officials, Pativedak or Prativedak. This official has been mentioned in probably 6th rock edict of Asoka. These people were again spies, and these people were probably important spies because they had direct access to the king. It is suggested that the king was available for them even if he was sleeping, he was resting, or he was in the harem. The Prativedikas had direct access to the king. So, it not only suggests the importance of this official as a very important official, but at the same time it also shows the concern of the king to remain aware of the developments taking place within his empire, and that is why he had accorded this unconditional access to the Prativedikas to himself. Then there is another category of officials which is known as Ant Mahamatya, and in fact Ant Mahamatyas were in charge of outlying and border areas. Their responsibility was to look after the administration of border areas, and at the same time they are also responsible for propagation of Dhamma. Now, these Ant Mahamatyas were assisted by another category of officials who were known as Ayutika. So, border areas officials, we have a different category of officials. This is a very significant point that can be discussed, that can be seen when we discuss the nature of the polity of Mauryas. Then, when Asoka adopted the policy of Dhamma, he appointed a new category of officials called Dhamma Mahamatya in the 14th regnal year of his reign, and as the name suggests, Dhamma Mahamatyas were responsible for propagation of Dhamma that was started by Asoka. Then we have three types of army. Talking about army administration, we have three types of army. It consisted of hereditary army, it consisted of hired soldiers, and it also consisted of soldiers of corporations. So, hired soldiers were not permanent employee of the state. Whenever there was a need of soldiers to the state, such people were recruited, and when the job was over, they were disbanded with. Then there was a category, third category of soldiers of corporation. This is a very significant development in fact in itself, because some of the guilds, they were so big, they were so rich and powerful that they maintained their own law and order with their own defense officials. Now, whenever there was a need by the state of such officials or such soldiers, the corporation or guilds or srenis as they were known, these srenis provided this army to the state as well. But by and large, the state had its own army. It was standing army, it was a permanent army, it was a paid army. Now, hired category and soldiers of corporation and guilds was rather an insignificant category. Then another important aspect of Mauryan army administration was that horses and elephants were the monopoly of the state or monopoly of the king. Any private individual was not allowed to keep an elephant or probably even a horse, because these were probably short in supply and they were required for efficient military administration. So, that is why it was maintained only by the state. Now, again Megasthenes has a different set of administrative structure for army administration as well. Just like in the case of city administration, for army administration too, Megasthenes suggests that the army administration was conducted by committees. The number of committees was again 6 and each committee consisted of 5 members. 5 members each in each committee, and these committees to look after various departments of army administration consisted of Navy, Commissariat, that is the committee which used to provide provisions or goods, various items required by various departments of army. The third committee was related to infantry, the fourth committee was related to cavalry, the fifth was related to chariot, and the sixth was related to elephant. So, this way we can see that the Mauryas had a very elaborate system of arrangement, administration rather, very elaborate arrangement of administration right from top to bottom or village level, and all the officials were appointed by the king or by the representatives of the king, and they were directly responsible to the king. So, there was a direct contact between the king and the people. There were no intermediaries because the officials who were there in between, they were basically officials appointed by the king and responsible to the king. So, this is in fact a feature of a centralized administration because these officials were also paid in cash. So, this is another feature of a centralized administration, and that is why some of the scholars have suggested that it was a highly centralized state. Now, this is our next topic of our discussion, that how we can see the Mauryan polity. What was the nature of the polity, what was the nature of the state? And there is, in recent times, there has been a debate because as we suggested earlier, the historians of earlier generation or conventional historians, they used to project Mauryan state as a highly centralized state, but in recent times this notion no longer holds ground. Now, because the idea of uniformity is also associated with highly centralized notion. If it was a highly centralized state, it has also been interpreted as a uniform state. That means the entire area which was under the control of the Mauryas was uniformly administered, there were uniformity in administration and governance. Now, this idea basically comes from the sources that have been used by the scholars to write the history of Mauryan time. Basically project such an idea, because if you look at Asokan inscriptions, they are spread all over the country. The informations in all similar inscriptions are similar. Then Arthashastra, then Indica by Megasthenes. Now, if we look at these sources, inscriptions, Asokan edicts, Arthashastra and Indica, it seems that probably Mauryan state was a very organized state, a very uniform state. Then there is a negative evidence also to it. Some scholars have suggested that because there is no reference of any other contemporary state in the sources, so one can suggest that the entire area was under the control of the Mauryas and it was uniformly administered and controlled. So, apart from this negative evidence, the idea of a uniform state flows from inscriptions, from Arthashastra and from Indica. Now, as far as these sources are concerned, we have already discussed the problems related to these sources when we were discussing our sources in our first lecture, where we saw that whether it is Arthashastra or it is Indica, there is problem in these sources. Even inscriptions are not descriptive in nature. So, as far as Asokan inscriptions and Arthashastra is concerned, they are, as we have said, prescriptive in nature. They expect the things to move in a particular way. But whether those prescriptions were followed by the state or officials, we do not know. We have no means to verify that whether whatever has been suggested in Arthashastra was actually followed or not. Whatever has been suggested in Asokan inscriptions was actually followed or not. And as far as Indica is concerned, we already have discussed the problem related to Indica, because Megasthenes was not familiar with Indian language. He was just a spectator at the Mauryan court, so probably he wrote whatever he perceived, and whatever is there in Indica is his own perception, and sometimes these perceptions are wrong too. So, in light of these sources, in recent times some scholars have criticized the idea of the notion. Now, here we can mention two scholars, one is Mabat and the other is Fussman. Now, Mabat has questioned the sources. He does not question the notion of centrality directly. He questioned the sources, and then he goes on to suggest that if the sources are problematic, one cannot say with certainty, one cannot be sure about the nature of a state on the basis of these sources, and one cannot suggest that it was a highly centralized state. Now, Fussman has criticized this idea of centralization on the basis of communication network, because he says that it was such a vast empire that it was not possible to maintain uniformity in administration throughout the empire. The empire, which had its capital at Patliputra, was spread up to the borders of Afghanistan in modern times, and if there was some disturbance in border areas, and if the governor of border areas tries to get instruction from Patliputra central authority, it will be very late. So, it is not possible to maintain a uniform type of structure, administrative structure, during those times when the modes and means of communication were not so developed. So, it is basically on the basis of the nature of the sources and the communication network, the notion of centrality has been questioned. Now, as far as that negative evidence of absence of reference of any contemporary state in the sources is concerned, one can also say that in the contemporary sources it is also not mentioned that there were no other states. So, this idea of centrality based on such inferences and sources is probably problematic. Now, such an idea was earlier put forward by Rumila Thapar as well in her early writings in Asoka and Decline of the Mauryas. She suggests Mauryan Empire to be a highly centralized state. But after all these criticisms of the sources, Rumila Thapar too changed her idea, modified her idea slightly, and then she suggested that in fact it was not a uniform administration, it was not a uniform state. The administration operated at three levels. One was the metropolitan area that consisted of Patliputra and its inner environs. The other was core area that consisted of Gangetic plain, and rest was periphery area. Then she suggests that as far as metropolitan and core area is concerned, it was directly under the control of the Mauryas, but rest of the area was not directly administered by the Mauryas, rather it was some arrangement through which the local chiefs accepted the suzerainty of the Mauryan Empire and they ruled in those areas on behalf of the Mauryan administration or Mauryan Empire. And Mauryan Empire required those areas for economic resources, for exploitation of economic resources. So, we can suggest that the uniform nature of administration that has been suggested, rather is suggested for Mauryan administration, was not so uniform, and probably it was not possible to have such a uniform administration, at least during those times when the means of transport and communication were not so strong. The country was divided, the country consisted of a number of religious, social and ethnic groups. So there was bound to be some diversity, and the administration was modified according to that diversity. Now, the next aspect of our lecture is on Dhamma of Asoka, that was started by Asoka sometimes late in his career. So, what was the purpose of this Dhamma? If we look at the existing background, we already have existence of a number of religions: Buddhism, Nirgrantha or Jainism, Ajivikas, and even Brahmanism. So there were already a number of social, religious and cultural groups existing in the society at that time. There were already so many religions existing in the society at that time. So where was the need to have a new religion?
5 minutes.
There was no need to have a new religion as it is suggested by some scholars. But the need for a new religion was actually the existence of so many religions in India during Mauryan times, because we have so many religions in Mauryan times, and all these religions were having ideological conflict with each other. Brahmanism was the dominant religion, and Brahmanism used to see all these religions with contempt. So the formation of the policy of Dhamma should be seen against this background of ideological conflict. Now, meaning of Dhamma is not, it's not actually, Dhamma is Prakrit version of the Sanskrit word Dharma, and it's not, it cannot be translated as religion. Basically, Dhamma or Dharma of Asoka was a way of life which Asoka wanted to propagate to be followed by diverse socio-ethnic, religious and cultural groups of India, and he wanted to weave these diverse elements into a thread to create a harmonious and peaceful atmosphere which was required for centralized administration as well as development and peace and prosperity of the country. So this harmonious relationship was not probably possible within a conflicting situation which was being propagated by the existing religions. That is why to build up a strong nation, to build up socially responsible people, the king, the ruler, Asoka, comes out with a new concept of religion which has elements, good elements of all the existing religions. Now, some people have suggested that Dhamma was actually complete adoption of Buddhism, but it was not so. If we look at Dhamma, it was not so, because there are so many ideas in Dhamma which were not there in Buddhism. Now, if talking about the features of Dhamma, basically Dhamma was aimed at maintenance of dignity of human beings. It wanted to inculcate virtuous behavior transcending all social, cultural and religious barriers. It professed toleration and religious eclecticism. Because if we look at the content of Dharma obtained from various inscriptions, basically major rock edicts, we find that the content goes on to suggest that Asoka is trying to bring before people an ideal ethical conduct that has to be followed by everyone. He says that how a son should behave with his father, how a person should behave with Brahmanas and Sarmanas, and how officials should behave with people, and so on so forth. What are the responsibilities of officials, what are the duties of son, what are the duties of a father, and so on so forth. And it was not aimed at a particular group. It was across all the socio-religious groups, because these are advices which are to be followed by everyone, and every individual would like these ideals to be followed. So it was not aimed at it at any particular group, any particular social group, any cultural group, or any religious group. It transcended all the boundaries. Then it also talks about toleration amongst human beings, and toleration amongst various groups, because there were various conflicts reported, and those conflicts in fact creating unstable situation, unstable condition in the society and for the administration as well. And so he also suggests religious eclecticism, that is to honor all the religions. He is not in favor of a particular religion. So Dhamma is not Buddhism, as sometimes it is suggested by some people. Dhamma talks of religious eclecticism, that it favors all the religion equally. So if we look at Asoka's Dhamma.
Okay, we will discuss it, but before now we are open to take questions, and we have a caller from Uttar Pradesh. So take this question. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I thank you for such a wonderful lecture.
Okay, thank you.
So my question is, sir, I want to know about architecture remain of Mauryan Empire.
Okay, architecture. Yeah, before starting the lecture, we were discussing about this, and I informed you we have already separate our 1 hour lecture on art and architecture in the morning 10 to 11. You can watch this, and the lectures are all related to art and architecture is available on YouTube. You go and see there, and particularly about the Mauryan art and architecture, we will organize some lecture on this very topic some other day. So if you have a precise question, you may ask to the sir, or if you don't have, you ask to the question related to Dhamma, administration, polity, and the other aspect of the Mauryan Empire, like economy and state, economy and society, we have discussed in the previous lectures.
Architecture calls for an entire separate lecture.
Yeah, that's why I told you.
Yeah. So here in this limited time, we cannot discuss all those things.
Yeah, only basic points, few points like the state patronized the architecture.
Yes,
came from the.
We have court art, we have public art.
Yeah, these are the basic features.
Yeah. So, while analyzing Asoka's Dhamma, if we look at its functioning, in the end it can be said that it was a failure.
Okay.
Because what Asoka started in 2nd century BC was adopted by Akbar in 16th century, when he came out with the idea of Din-e-Ilahi. The purpose of Akbar was also similar, but in spite of very good intentions and very good ethical element in this religion that was propagated by them, this failed. There can be so many reasons that can be suggested, but some important reasons that we can discuss here is that some restrictions imposed by Asoka, probably as part of this Dhamma, or probably as administrative measure, these restrictions in fact antagonize the people to some extent. For example,
so was it a sort of administrative order or administrative circular, because we find in the form of edicts in different locations?
Dhamma can be said to be an administrative tool.
Okay, not an order or circular.
The purpose was maintenance of harmony and calmness and peaceful, to create a peaceful environment for smooth functioning of government, and at the same time to strengthen the power of the state.
Okay.
If it was centralized, the king wanted it to be more.
So from other sources, what sort of disturbances we have of the periods? Keeping that in the mind, it was brought into the fore.
We are going to talk. For example, Asoka is said to have banned some of very popular gatherings.
Okay.
For example,
We will discuss, but before take the question from the Hyderabad. Yeah. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, thank you for this lecture, sir. And
Thank you.
sir, could you please tell me the relevance of Ashoka's dharmas in present today's society, sir?
yeah,
Okay.
it's a very good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Please, sir.
Yeah, the ideals propagated by Asoka in his Dhamma are very good for any point of time in history, not only in today's time. Now, if they are actually practiced, if they are actually adopted by everybody in the society, definitely it will lead to very
Peaceful coexistence.
peaceful coexisting society. But here we are also discussing the problems of Asoka Dhamma, because on the one hand he talks about religious eclecticism, that is honoring all the religions.
Okay.
But on the other hand, what we find is that he is appointing Dhamma Mahamattas. Now, Dhamma Mahamattas were responsible only for propagation of Dhamma. He is not treating all the religions at par, one. Second, he banned some very popular gatherings, especially at the time of marriage and birth, etc., because Asoka used to say that these are useless festivals and the expenditure in such festivals are useless. So such festivals should be banned.
Okay.
Now, this created some sort of resentment among the masses, because these festivals were celebrated by the people with great enthusiasm, and ban on such festivals probably was not liked by the people.
And that
Then-
kind of ban have been enforced in the history. Even now, we have a large number of people. are
Yeah,
banned.
yeah, we still
So
talk
this
of
was the relevance of the
we
Dhamma.
still talk of cost cutting, and also this can be a measure.
Okay.
Probably Asoka realized that it was a useless expenditure,
Okay.
so it should be curtailed or banned. Then another aspect, in his Dhamma, Asoka talks about ahimsa, non-violence. Ahimsa means what? Prohibition of killing of any animal or human being or any living being. But on the other hand, if you believe the inscriptions, he allows the killing of 2 peacocks and 1 deer daily in his royal kitchen.
Okay.
Now, maybe earlier more peacocks and deers were killed. He reduces it to only to 2, but still he is allowing the killing of these animals. So on the one hand, it was suggested that one should practice, one should believe in ahimsa, non-violence, and on the other hand, we have this contradiction. So such problems are there, but in spite of all these problems, we can find that the ideas propagated by Asoka in his Dhamma were very good ideas, very good ethical code of conduct that should have been professed, and had it been professed with sincerity, probably the duration of Mauryan tenure would have been longer, because it was also aimed at strengthening the strength of the central empire
Okay.
of the king.
We have call from Odisha. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, go ahead. Please ask your question.
Sir, in Asoka administration, Asoka inscription, there is a word ahara.
Sir, we are,
Administrative unit.
please ask your question. Hello. Okay, please reduce your volume of television, then ask your question. Only then we can hear you, otherwise it's not possible to hear you. Okay? Reduce volume of your television.
Sir,
Yeah.
in Asoka inscription, there is a word ahara, ideal administrative unit.
Okay.
What is it, sir?
Okay, in Asoka inscription there is a mention of ideal administration. What is it? Yeah, how administration could be supposed to be an ideal one? Yeah. What is expected from it?
Asoka inscription directly does not talk about administration.
Okay.
there is no directly discussion about administration. But if we look at his inscription, his major rock edicts are on Dhamma.
Okay.
Now it is in that content that we get some references or information related to administration as well. But broadly, major rock edicts are related to Dhamma, minor rock edicts are related to personal life of the king, and the pillar edicts are basically appendices. So there is no direct reference about administration. Now as far as administration is concerned, we have mentioned it from time to time in our lecture that, for example, Prativedikas are there mentioned in the Asokan inscription. In the holy inscription he says that all men are my children, so there is some sense of paternal despotism as well. But there is no coherent discussion at one place in any of the Asokan inscription.
Okay. So, as you said that Dhamma cannot be equated with the Buddhism. So, but is there any kind of influence of middle path of Buddhism on the Asoka Dhamma?
Yes, of course it is there. No, it's influenced by Buddhism.
Okay.
No, what I said is not that Dhamma is not influenced by Buddhism. Dhamma is influenced by Buddhism. But some people say that Dhamma is complete adoption of Buddhism, which is not.
What are the point of difference and what are the point of similarities?
For example, in Buddhism, there is no idea of heaven, or there is no life after death.
Okay.
Whereas in Asokan Dhamma, Asoka suggests that if you behave in the manner prescribed in Dhamma, you will go to
that
heaven
will lead to the heaven.
in the next life.
Okay.
So there is talk of life after death.
So he combined the philosophy of Hinduism
So
and
many, yeah. He
Hinduism
took
and
all,
Buddhism.
basically his purpose was to appease all the people, to bring under one umbrella. He tried to weave together the diverse elements of the society in one thread,
Okay.
though he could not succeed.
Okay. What is the major drawback or major lacuna of this Dhamma, though it is good in intention?
That is what we talk. There are some contradictions. Contradictions like you impose.
Does it contradict to the human nature?
Yeah, you impose ban on popular festivals, which is celebrated because life of an ordinary person random gets some celebration, hardly gets some celebration. They celebrate when there is some birth, or they celebrate when there is a marriage. And if you ban those celebrations too, there will be no joy in the life of ordinary person. So it will be definitely resented by ordinary people.
Okay. So the aspiration and the demand of time need to be kept while framing such kind of Dhamma policy.
One more problem with Dhamma was that when there is talk of honoring all the religions, but you are appointing only a particular official for propagation of a particular religion. You are appointing Dhamma Mahamata only for propagation of Dhamma. Then the king also used to take Dhamma yatras by himself for propagation of Dhamma. But he did not take these yatras for propagation of other religions.
Well, so something that yields result in the given time, someone which is timeless, and that is being adopted over the times in all time frame, we can say that. So well friends, with this word we conclude the lecture, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. O.P. Singh for giving such a wonderful lecture on this topic.
Thank you so much.
Very much.